Hello everyone, my name is Unnati and I am a book editor and a ghostwriter. And over the past few years, I have worked with independent authors and publishing teams, helping shape their stories to more polished version. And something I've noticed again and again in this is that a lot of writers aren't struggling because they lack ideas or talent. They're struggling because they're trying too hard to follow advice that isn't helping them. You have probably heard things like show, don't tell, write every day, right? Only read the classics. And on the surface, these sound like solid tips. I used to believe them very strictly too when I was starting out. But over the time, I specifically while editing real manuscript, I have realized that a lot of this advice is either incomplete, misunderstood, or taken way too far. So in this video, I want to talk about some of the most common writing advice that might actually be holding you back and what you can do instead. The very first advice which you must have heard is write every day, and this is one of the most common thing I see every single time, and this one can feel very motivating at first. Write every day. It sounds disciplined, productive, and serious. And yes, consistency does matter. But writing every day, that's not realistic for everyone. And most importantly, it doesn't work for everyone. I have seen writers feel genuinely guilty because they couldn't stick to a daily writing routine. They start thinking, maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe I'm not meant to be a writer. But that's not true. Life is not always structured in a way that allows daily writing. You might be studying, working, or dealing with personal responsibility, or just mentally tired someday. And that's okay. Forcing yourself to write every day, even when you're exhausted, can actually make you dislike writing, which is opposite of what we want. From what I have seen while working with different writers, everyone has a different rhythm. Some people work in short bursts during the week, some write only on the weekends, some do longer writing sessions one or twice a week, and all of these can work. What matters more is consistency. Yes, consistency over time, not perfection every day. Even if you write 2 to 3 times a week or a few hours on weekend, that still adds up, like very slowly. It's adding up. Also, something I've personally noticed is taking break can actually improve your writing. Sometimes when you step away from your story and come back later, you see things more clearly. So instead of focusing on write every day, a better approach might be find a writing routine that you can realistically maintain and allow some flexibility. Because writing is not just about discipline, it's also about energy, clarity, and a lot of things. Now, this is also another common one you must have heard. Good writing comes naturally. This one can be really discouraging because it creates the idea that some people are just naturally good writers and others are not. But from what I have seen, writing is a skill that improves with practice, feedback, and revision. Most strong writers you see now these days have gone through multiple edits. Even simple clean writing usually takes effort. So if something feels difficult right now, that's normal. It doesn't mean that you're not good at writing. It just means you're still learning. Another one is show, don't tell. When I started learning about writing, this advice felt almost like a rule. Like if you tell anything, your writing automatically becomes bad. And yes, showing is important. For example, instead of saying Ria was nervous, you might show her checking her phone repeatedly, avoiding eye contact, or fidgeting with her sleeves. This kind of detail helps the reader experience the moment rather than being told what's happening. But here's what I have noticed while editing manuscripts. Some writers take this advice so seriously that they stop telling anything at all. And that's create a different problem. Sometimes I read scenes that are full of physical action. People walking, sitting, picking things up. But I still don't understand what the character is actually feeling or thinking. It feels distant, almost like I am watching everything from the outside. But I am not emotionally connected. That's where telling becomes important. Telling isn't always lazy writing. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes the reader needs a direct line into the character's thought. For example, she felt a quiet sense of disappointment she couldn't explain. That's not something you can always fully show through action. And if you try too hard to show something, your writing can become overly long or even confusing. So instead of thinking show, don't tell, it's more helpful to think when should I show and when should I not. From what I have seen, good writing usually is it's a mixture of both of them. Show for emotional moment, tension, and important scene. Tell when you need clarity, pacing, or internal insight. It's not about choosing one, it's about balance. Your first draft should be perfect. This is something many writers don't say out loud but feel internally. There is this pressure to get everything right in the first draft, and because of that, they over edit when writing, keep rewriting the same paragraph, or never finish the draft at all. I've seen this happen quite often, and honestly, it slows down progress more than anything else. Your first draft is not supposed to be perfect, it's just supposed to exist. That's it. It's where you explore your ideas, understand your characters, figure out what your actual story is. Clarity usually comes after the first draft, not before. Even when I'm working on ghostwriting projects, the early drafts are never final. They just evolve. So if you're someone who keeps stopping to fix every sentence, try allowing yourself to write a messy version first. You can always improve it later. Another one I keep hearing is you need a unique idea. This is another belief that puts a lot of pressure on writers. I need a completely original idea, completely different. But if you look closely, most stories share similar foundation. What makes them feel different is the way they are told, the characters, the voice. From what I've seen, two writers can take a similar idea and create completely different stories. So instead of worrying about too much originality, focus on clarity, emotion, and execution. That's usually matters more. Another one I keep hearing is write what you know. This is taken too literally. Like we should write only what we know. This advice is actually helpful because limiting our knowledge can be misunderstood. Some writers feel like they can only write about their own life, their own experiences, but writing also involves imagination. You don't have to personally experience something to write about it. What helps more is understanding emotions, observing people, doing some research where needed. So instead of taking this advice literally, think of it like this: write what you understand or what we are willing to understand. That's the most important thing. Another one I keep hearing is only read the classics. This is one of the advice which sounds very intellectual but can be very limiting. You must have often heard people say things like, if you want to write well, only read classic authors. And don't get me wrong, classics can be really valuable. They teach you how story was structured historically, how themes were explored deeply, and how language can be used beautifully. But I don't think they should be the only thing you read, specifically if you're someone who want to write and publish today. Because writing isn't just about good language. It's also about understanding readers, knowing what style feel natural today, seeing how modern stories are paced. That's also important. For example, many new writers I have worked with struggle with pacing. Not because they're bad writers, but because they're unknowingly influenced by older, slower story writing styles. And that doesn't always connect with today's reader. Also, only reading classics can sometimes make writing feel intimidating. You start comparing yourself to authors who wrote in completely different time with completely different population, and it can make you feel like your writing it's not good enough. So instead, what I've found helpful is, and what I usually suggest is, read a mix. Read classic for depth and structure. Read modern books for style, pacing, and voice. And honestly, read things you enjoy. That's the most important thing. Because when you enjoy what you're reading, you naturally start understanding story writing better. When I was starting out, I learned just as much from contemporary fiction and even simple storytelling style as I did from traditional literature. So don't limit yourself too much here. Another advice I keep hearing is write what's trending. Yes, this is something I see a lot, specifically on booktubes, Instagram, and specifically with new writers. A genre which is suddenly becoming popular, like romance, fantasy trope, or something viral. And the immediate reaction is, okay, this is what I should be writing if I want my book to sell. And I get why this feels logical. Because from what I have seen, this approach doesn't really work the way people expect it to. And the main reason is simple: publishing takes time, a lot more time than we think. Even if you write your book quickly, there are still so many steps after that: editing, revision, maybe querying if you're going through the traditional route, or if you're self-publishing, there's still planning, formatting, marketing. By the time your book is actually out there, the trend you were trying to follow might not be popular anymore. And if you try to rush it just to match what's trending, you usually end up entering a space that's already overcrowded with similar stories. I have seen this happen where multiple writers are trying to write very similar concept at the same time, and it becomes harder for one story to stand out. So instead of asking what is trending right now, a more helpful question might be, what kind of story do I actually want to spend months writing on? Because writing a book takes time and energy, and if you don't genuinely enjoy the story you are writing, it becomes really difficult to stay consistent with it. And something I've noticed when reading draft is that when a writer is emotionally connected to their stories, it shows. The writing feels more natural, the characters feel more natural. That doesn't mean that you should completely ignore trend. If you already enjoy a genre that happens to be popular right now, that's great. That can actually work in your favor. But forcing yourself to write in a genre just because it's trending, specifically when you are not interested in it, usually doesn't lead to your best work. trends, they change very quickly. What feels in demand today might feel overdone later. So it's safer to build your writing around something that you can actually care about and let trends be a secondary factor, not the main reason you're writing. Now, the last one, and I'm completely biased with this. Writers are still figuring out where they stand on it. AI tools are becoming more common, and I've seen many writers use them for brainstorming ideas, outlining plot, or even get quick feedback on their draft. And honestly, I do think they can be useful in certain ways. For example, if you're stuck or need a starting point to generate ideas, can sometimes help you move forward. But where I think things get a little bit tricky is when writers start relying on AI for deeper editing or creative decisions. From my experience working with authors, editing is just not about fixing sentences. It's about understanding what the writer is trying to say, what the reader is likely to feel, and where the story is not fully coming through yet. Sometimes a scene looks fine on the surface, but emotionally it's not landing, or a character's reaction doesn't feel consistent, but it's not immediately obvious why. They're the kind of things that usually come out through discussion, feedback, and a bit of back and forth. And that's something I personally feel is hard to fully replace with automated feedback, because a lot of editing involves nuances. It's not just about what this is wrong, fix it. It's more like this part feels naturally off. Maybe we can explore it a bit more. I think the emotion here could be stronger. What was your intention in this scene? Things like this. Even as an editor, I don't always have instant answers. Sometimes it's a process, and that process is very human. That said, I don't think it has to be either or. You can use AI tools as support, but not necessarily as a complete replacement for thoughtful feedback. Specifically, if you're working on something long form, like a book, where consistency, voice, and emotional depth really matter. There is so much advice out there, and it can get quickly overwhelming. Sometimes I've learned over time is that not all advice is meant to be followed exactly as it. A lot of it depends on where you are as a writer, what you're trying to create, and what actually works for you. So instead of trying to apply everything, take what makes sense, test it. Yes, and see if it helps you write. And if something isn't working for you, it's okay to let it go. Writing is not just a fixed formula, it's something you figure out gradually. And honestly, that's the part of what makes it interesting. So, bye bye, and I'll see you in the next video.